Super. We have a panel of very shy and retiring folks who, no, this is a feisty group, this is a fun group. We're going to mix it up and have some feisty fun. And they have really important perspectives, vantage points on educational inequities and the impacts of that, the stakes of that, and will really be providing a really important additional dimension to this whole conversation around economic inclusion and digital equity. And it is being this panel, and they're going to introduce themselves in the interest of time rather than doing a read off from a bio, which you can get from the Summit Agenda webpage. You click on the names and you see the bios there. But what we want to do is to Tom Gentzel is the Chief Executive Officer for the National School Boards Association, and we're very honored that he has joined us, and all of our panelists are just stellar human beings and very insightful educators, and you're in for a treat. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody.
Don't fall off the stage.
Yeah.
Don't fall, because we're not going to help you get up, brother. You're on your own, okay?
Well, that would be a news story. The executive director of the National School Boards Association injured at the NEA building. There would be a lot of, Donna, there would be a lot of speculation about what was going on there. No, actually, it's an honor to be back in this building. We come here quite a bit. We have a really great panel, and I think we will start by just asking each of them to tell you just very briefly, and I will be enforcing this, folks, very briefly about you and why the heck you're on this stage tonight. And I'm going to start with my good friend, Steve Corona. Steve.
My speaking fee is very low.
That's a good reason.
The first reason, no, I'm a member of the Fort Wayne, Indiana School Board, been on for 38 years. They can't get rid of me. And just ended a 2-year term on the National School Boards Association Board of Directors, and also chaired the group of a National Hispanic Council of School Board members. Also serve as executive director of a nonprofit in Fort Wayne called Latinos Count, and we help Latinos and other minority youth figure out what their exit strategy is going to be from high school.
He does not want to give up the microphone. Hi, good evening. Karen Cator, CEO of Digital Promise. Digital Promise is a nonprofit with a big mission to spur innovation to improve learning opportunity. So when we think about that, it's all hands on deck. This whole CRA thing is kind of a very sort of fundamentally systemic approach, and that's why I'm here.
I have a microphone. Good evening. My name is Arletha McSwain. I am representing my president from the great Bethune-Cookman University, and the only reason that I am at the level that I am is because of a very, very dear friend in this room by the name of Dr. Robbie Melton. And she has a way of giving you one chance to do what she tells you to do. And if you don't do what she tells you to do, then you're out of gas. So seriously, all of our successes at Bethune-Cookman University is because of Dr. Robbie Melton. So thank you, Robbie. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dina Lehmann-Kim, and I'm with HUD with the ConnectHome USA program, which is a voluntary program. We asked public housing authorities and tribes to volunteer to bridge the digital divide in their communities. It is a public-private partnership program. HUD does not provide any direct funding. And so we work with a nonprofit, and everyone who is leading the expansion program called ConnectHome USA. HUD launched the pilot program ConnectHome in 2015, and we're very fortunate to be able to continue this work and expand it with our nonprofit partner.
Good evening. My name is Donna Harris-Aikens. I'm the Senior Director for Education Policy and Practice here at the National Education Association. And I think I'm on this panel this evening to talk about the fact that students and communities, parents, need, and there's a lot that they need, and much of the list of things that schools need and that students need comes down to the fact or the question of whether they have access digitally to the things that they need to access. It's not everything, but it does undergird much of what students and parents and schools are asking for today.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Jacqueline Rodriguez. I'm the Assistant Vice President of Programs and Professional Learning at the American Association of Colleges for Teacher Education. I'm also sitting in for my President and CEO, Lynn Gangone. And I believe that we were invited for the panel because AACTE has a membership of institutional partners, so 800 institutional members, colleges and universities that prepare teachers, of which almost 90% of the teachers in the country are prepared at our member institutions. So we are deeply invested in ensuring that every student has access to a high quality, highly effective teacher, which begins with ensuring that that teacher has access and opportunities through digital equity.
Great. Thank you, guys. So this is a conversation we're going to have for a few minutes, and we'll open it up for Q&A. I do want to say this is part, for those who are watching the live stream version of this is part of a program that's been going on all day and will continue tomorrow. And I will confess, I'm just a late arriver, but I've heard from some folks. There's been some great conversations today. But the subject of this conversation, I think, is really important. I want to just pose this, I want to frame it and then ask for your comments about this. So the big issues that really drive this discussion, I think, is really the income inequality in this country and the wide variance in access to resources. So we have both the digital inequity in terms of access to equipment and services, the educational equity issue, which NSBA and NEA and many other groups have spent a lot of time dealing with and addressing the unique needs of all students, and then economic inclusion, the opportunity for all people to have access to meaningful employment. So in this regard, the CRA program, the opportunity for funding to support these initiatives, to address these issues, let me just get your take quickly on how you think that's working and where you see the biggest opportunities for us, particularly groups like those represented in this room and those watching to help change the conversation. We'll do it in reverse order, Jack.
Oh, okay. So I'll give you a concrete example, perhaps. At AACTE, we have been working a lot with our institutions who are interested in doing rural education, and typically that doesn't have to do with face-to-face support, but rather online instruction. And there has been some significant and provocative debate regarding online instruction. But recently, we have launched a special education networked improvement community. And for those of you who don't know, this is 10 institutional partners who are looking at reducing the teacher shortage, specifically in the area of special education. And in review of those applications, what we were struck by were so many institutions that identified the strategy that they wanted to pursue over the next 4 years was looking at online instruction to support rural communities where teachers did not have access to highly effective preparation and they couldn't stay in their rural communities and continue to teach there. So instead, they were leaving the community and teaching elsewhere or going to a face-to-face instruction and then incurring significant debt. So what these institutions are looking at is supporting online instruction in the rural communities, and in, I would say, beyond that, they were looking at communities with indigenous populations as well. And we know that that's an area that I think the association has not done enough in, and we know that we want to do more in. So for us, that was really striking that we could work to bridge not just the digital equity divide there, but also considering that those teachers are going to stay in the rural community, lift the instruction of those students, and those students would then have greater prosperity when they moved into their collegiate experiences.
That's great. Wow.
So one of the things that we see a lot across the schools that we go visit and talking to our members who work in those public schools across the country is there is often, when you think about digital issues, there is often an influx of, not often enough, but often, an influx of the technology itself into the school, but not enough conversation, not enough time, and not enough resource actually to pay attention to a plan that would make that actually make sense. So for example, if you go into my kid's school right now, there are a lot of whiteboards, there are a lot of computers on laptop carts. There is plenty of equipment, but it's not tied to a plan across a district and certainly not in a school, and mainly because no one asked the educators what they needed. And if they did ask what they needed, there was no time for them to plan based on what they were going to get. So they come into the school year, there's stuff, but they didn't know it was going to be there. So they've already done their lesson plans. So they've got to figure out in the middle of the school year how to include the stuff in what they had planned to do with their kids. So the one thing I would say is that there's an equipment issue and there's an access issue around the digital access. But there's also an access issue around the professional development and, quite frankly, just the planning time for educators, either with students, with parents, but for educators to get together and think about what they need and how they would use it, how their classrooms would change, how their students would be learning differently before you buy the first piece of equipment. Because the piece of equipment you might think you need may not be the piece you need. It may be something entirely different, which is fine. As long as you've got the plan, you can figure that stuff out. So I would say figure out the how first and the why before you get to the what in the technology space.
So I have something similar to say from the HUD perspective. When we talk about the digital divide or the stools, the three-legged stool of digital inclusion, it's access to affordable internet, access to affordable devices, and training. And I think without the training, especially in our communities, the devices and the access to the internet aren't as powerful as they could be. And so when you think about the communities that we're serving, we're serving very low-income communities, and these are residents who suffer from mental illness, underperforming schools, poor health, very, very little job training or opportunity, and so to expect them to learn technology in those circumstances is very difficult. And as Bob will remember, last year at the ConnectHome USA Summit, one of our presenters talked about trauma-informed digital inclusion, and that really resonated with me and with Bob. And basically what that means is a training program that addresses the whole person, where they are, what they need, and could even address the family's needs as well, and builds on not just digital literacy, but what are their workforce needs, and what are their other information needs, for example. But that costs money. I hate to say it's true. If it's got to be sustained and it's got to be integrated, and so I would say that's the biggest need for us. Yeah.
If my president were here, he would say, HBCUs have always had a mission of providing the best services with limited resources. And when you look at the HBCUs all over the country, sometimes we don't even have a three-legged stool. But he would also say, we have to work on completing one another and not competing against one another. So in last semester, and this is where I met Bob through Robbie, is on our campus, we hosted 24 HBCUs on our campus with an OER initiative. And OER is Open Educational Resources, because many of our students come to campus where their parents have scraped every penny just to come on campus. Many of our students are first-generation students, right? And for them to have to decide between buying a book in a face-to-face class or an online class, or having money for food or for gas, or just the basic necessities, we didn't want them to do that. So Bethune-Cookman University will be launching in the fall, the first 2 years textbook free, and the MBA online textbook free, right? But, well, thank you. Watching the video today with the younger population and the need for them to have technology, even at the college level, there still is a great need for resources. You can have a wonderful online degree program, but without the computers or the laptops or the LMS design or access to the internet, what is the point? So we are thrilled to be a part of this process. So we are hoping that all of us collectively will assist HBCUs in being complete and not competing.
That's great. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you. And actually, before I start, just thank you, everybody. The work combined in this room is sort of amazing, and the sort of history as well. So a couple things. First, when we think about the digital divide, we talk about what we call the digital learning gap. And it's really the gap consists of three things. First is access, right? So we all know about access. We've talked about broadband devices. The second is participation, and that is how and why do I participate? So if you think of adults in the communities that are trying to figure out how to get a new job, how to apply for a job, how to do banking, there are so many things that now require sort of a basic digital literacy. So it's this kind of participation gap that is alive and well that we need to also focus on. And then the third is what we call powerful learning, and that is making sure that people know how the technology can help them, not that they're plugged into headphones and the technology is telling them to solve a math problem, right? So how do we do those three things? Break down the access gap, make sure everybody has access. 2, they know how and why to participate. And 3, how to use the technology in powerful ways to solve challenges. So that's the first thing. The second thing I want to say is kind of taking it up to a much higher level. McKinsey Global Institute did a study, and they looked worldwide at what the predictions are for the workforce between now and 2030. 2030 is when today's first graders are going to graduate from high school. Not that far away when you really think about it, right? So 2030. So their predictions basically say that there will be enough jobs to keep people employed in 2030 to the same about level as today. However, the jobs are going to be substantially different. So we all hear this all the time, the low-level jobs are going away, people are going to need more education, more training. That is real, and it is right now. It is not like we'll deal with it in 2029. It's like between now and then, that's what's going to happen, and as significant as the transition out of agriculture or in the industrial age, right? So that's kind of keep reminding people like why this is important, and education is the advance team. Education is going to advance the economic future of this country, advance national security, advance social justice. So education is critical. And the last thing I'll say is just think for a second about you wake up in the morning, you need to learn something new, what do? You gotta, I mean, you can think about it for a little bit, right? But you probably somewhere in there, you're gonna say, I'm gonna check the internet, I'm gonna look it up, I'm gonna Google it, I'm gonna get some information, I'm gonna find an expert, I'm gonna find, my people, my tribe, whatever. And a lot of that happens online. So thinking about how people learn today, healthcare, all of those kinds of things, there's a technology component to that, and that is another sort of a critical element to this conversation.
Well, I want to continue that focus on jobs, and I want to do that through the eyes of someone you know and someone you don't know, Tom Friedman and Cielo Paniagua. Today, public and private partnerships are more critical than ever before if we want to close the digital divide. In 2005, Tom Friedman's book, The World is Flat, A Brief History of the 21st Century was published, and what he talked about was globalization, how the changing world marketplace and technology would change the lives of the middle class here as an emerging middle class in China would begin to demand more and more products, right? So what he talked about really were the untouchables. He talked about those people who were going to be pretty secure in the job market if their jobs could not be exported, automated, or digitized, okay? Look what's happened since 2005. We buy most of our holiday gifts online. Malls are closing. We see the fact that we talk, Whole Foods and Amazon is talking about grocery stores without cashiers. We have warehouses where you have automated pickers. We have automation everywhere, except in New Jersey, where they still will pump your gasoline.
That's true.
For a visiting Hoosier, I wanted to get out of my car but could not. I'm sure I was going to be arrested there. But you know, so he talked about that, and then I want to talk to you about Cielo Paniagua. She's a young single woman, beautiful daughter Nicole, who's in preschool. Cielo also takes care of her mother and her grandmother. I met her last year when she was awarded a scholarship. She was in her second year of a 2-year degree to get her nursing degree. Friday she graduated and Colleen and I were there. She's going to be hired by a local hospital. I asked her as I was sitting here and listening to the conversations today about how important the internet was to her, because she didn't have it at home. So she would either stay late at school or she would go to her sister's house. Was this an issue for any of her other classmates? No, because they could all afford it. You know that Comcast has Internet Essentials, $10 a month. Could you afford that? No, stuck to Essentials. CRA has the opportunity and the potential to help create digital scholarships, not only for the access, but for the hardware too. And that's why I'm here. That's why I'm here, because I think CRA has the potential to close the digital divide and provide income equality to more and more Americans. And we know the job market is going to continue to change. And if we don't get with it, it's our fault.
And on that note, because I don't want to forget to make this announcement, Rob, you put a little pressure on me before we got here to make some type of an announcement. We had talked about having a summit in January for the HBCUs to focus on CRA. But because we have limited resources, unless there's someone in the room that would like to focus on providing travel for HBCUs to come to Florida, the plan B is I met with Barry at lunch, and he's agreed to host a webinar in the event that we can't actually have the summit on our campus. So we talked about awareness, and I think we already have set the stage with Dr. Melton, and as you heard her say earlier, that not one HBCU is aware of that, and she looked at me when she said that, so I got a little nervous. So I'm saying, Dr. Melton, that Bethune-Cookman prayerfully will be the first HBCU to host a CRA conference on our campus or via webinar.
Well,
so that's
I
our
want to be an apostle, not an impossible. Or maybe,
I'm like,
or
okay.
Or maybe it's an impossible apostle. But I really need to talk to my fellow school board members, both in urban districts and in rural districts, where they don't have the internet. And really, CRA, what's that? But I think there is that potential. And coming to your campus in Florida in January sounds like an outstanding idea. Outstanding.
So let me just pick up on this, and I want you to know, first of all, before I make this next statement, I read a lot of news online, but I was flying back the other day, and I actually had a newspaper. Do you remember this? A newspaper, and I felt like a Neanderthal on the plane. But it really made me think about the issue that has been identified here, which is this is the economic piece of it, right? In terms of just access to job, awareness of jobs, and how you apply for jobs today. All of this, to pick up on what Steve was just saying, this is part of the change that we've seen over the last 10 or 15 years. So, first of all, I want to ask this question, and this is a jump ball. I say that sadly because the Sixers just lost, but I'm still going to move on with basketball for just a minute. Yeah, well, you know. I've never seen ball bounce so much before I went into a basket, but that's another matter. So, question for the group, and anybody can jump in on this. What did you just hear from other panelists that you were either surprised to hear or you want to know more about from somebody else in this panel? Anything surprise you?
well, as you guys are passing around microphones, so I'm super interested in all of the various ways partnerships take place, right? So we work with, actually Cricket Foley's here, we work with education innovation clusters, meaning regional areas where universities and colleges and local school districts and all the local providers, parks and museums and whatever else, community centers, all the places where learning can happen, and they can be all sorts of places, right? Backyards, whatever. Like, how do we think about that? And so I'm actually, we don't need to do it right now, but I'm super interested in what role HBCUs can play in a community, because they're placed in a community, and the surrounding community is such, there's such a richness of connected opportunity. And I'm going to steal your complete don't compete line.
But we share. We share.
Oh, yeah, that's right, not steal, because we don't compete.
That's right. But I think if you just look at in the room and you look at the panel and you look at, although there is diversity, we all have a common goal. And when we come from a place of love and kindness, and my background's early childhood, so I'm touchy-feely, but if we took what we have right now from all day, and thank you for just pulling this together, if we took that and we just shared it with one person outside of this group, just think how powerful it could be. Because it's not about what I have, it's about what I can share.
And then over-deliver 10 people, not one.
There you go.
So I think the piece that struck me that I hadn't quite thought about for this issue were two things. One, the HBCU connection. I actually earned my law degree from an HBCU and never would have thought to bring these two things together. And I grew up in a rural area, and while I know what that area still doesn't have, I was trying to think about the kinds of assets that my hometown does have, and are they actually aware of the CRA? So what's been rolling through my mind is I think we presume that people are aware, and I know that that's not true. So what is it that needs to happen? So one, the people who need it can access it, and the people who aren't aware of the resources that are actually available can be made aware of that. So yes, it is going to talk to your 10 best friends or your 10 enemies, your 10 frenemies, whoever they are, but to get more people to know about it, because the potential for this to be a game changer in the economic space for this country is just amazing, and I don't think we have nearly tapped the potential for what it could be.
So I have a question, and I don't mean this as a negative at all. In 39 years of working in public education, I'm deeply committed. But I will also be one to say, we have our own, shall we say, our own language. We have our own way of speaking to each other. And what strikes me is, for this program to be successful, and of course CRA applies to a lot more than some of the issues we're just talking about now, to convince those in finance, in the banking community, of the value and the importance of looking at the very issues we're talking about. How do we frame that in a way that we're using a common language that can be understood? Because I think the world of finance is very different, and we see this in a lot of different professional spheres. So are there thoughts about how this can be presented and framed in a way that's compelling and makes a good argument for the kind of investment we're talking about?
I'll try. I don't have the solution necessarily, but the OECD had an amazing quote, I think around 2010. They released a report about the impact of education in fragile and conflict area countries. And it's a bit sad that you can apply that into contexts within the United States and elsewhere. But what they noted was that education has the greatest impact to change areas of fragility. It's the only way you're going to change areas of fragility. And when we think about economic prosperity, the only access point to economic prosperity is through high quality education. Not necessarily education forever, which we would argue, yes, that's also a point, but high quality, highly effective education where you know what opportunities exist, and then you can access those opportunities. It's about access and opportunity. So I always want to bring it back to, it's not about the general nature of things. As a special educator, I'm always thinking about like the vulnerable / marginalized populations. It's about who it's not reaching, and ensuring that the finance industry understands that the people they're hearing from the most are likely not the people who need it. It's the people they're not hearing about, and they don't realize, don't even know that it exists. So that's our job.
The responsibility is on us to make the persuasive argument to our bankers that the investment of CRA dollars into digital education is a good deal for them too. Because they've figured out that the proper use of CRA dollars in having low to moderate income people, families, become homeowners and car buyers is good for them, right? Because they've got to take out a loan. Well, we've got to convince them that this is going to be good for our communities too. I know back home, our region is focused on growing our regional population to 1 million, which would be a jump from 800,000 to 1 million people, and that we want 60% of our adults with a certificate or degree valued by local industry. This is a way to reach economic goals, and I think that's at least the argument that I'm going to make in having them to shift where they now spend CRA funds, and not all of it, but some of it, to digital education.
If I could just piggyback, I would say that these are investments in a future workforce, future innovators, and future entrepreneurs. And so it sort of piggybacks on what you were saying about how the jobs are changing. Well, we need to raise the people, for example, living in public housing who are being excluded. Who knows how many innovators are there? We need to give them the opportunity to innovate and to have access to these new tools.
I'm not going to be as kind as you guys are, right? I think sometimes you have to agitate, right? You have to agitate, you have to advocate, you have to facilitate, right? So I'm thinking maybe what we should perhaps find a way to have them walk in the shoes of those who don't have what they have. Maybe we should say, if just for one day you had no access to your digital device, for one day, and then understand that we have children and families and school districts and universities that don't have that, but yet you're saying for an HBCU or a minority serving institution or a small liberal school, you've got to sustain by having what? Online degree programs. But if you don't have laptops or cell phones or iPads or the device, how do you compete? How do you survive? So let's say walk a day in the shoes of those who haven't had the opportunities that you've had.
Affecting change has always been a delicate dance between praising and pinching. And it may be that you're going to have to do a little bit more pinching than praising.
Thank you. With that, let's see if there are, Bob, we have time for a couple questions. Well, let's see if we have questions from the audience. Yep.
Thank you.
All right.
Hey, Robbie?
All
Phil
right.
Donahue, working the floor here.
Thanks, Robbie.
Thank you all for your comments. I'm going to just throw something out that has been bothering me. When you talk about going to bankers, that's a little scary for many minorities, because the history has been, when you go to a bank, you are denied. They're not your friends. They're not someone that just come and sit and break bread with you. So even with the information, even with the empowerment, just having to go to that local banker is not an easy thing. So I would like for you all to address just going into the door of the banks, the Fortune 500, when it has been in your history denial, denial, denial.
Powerful question.
I'm gonna bring you, Robbie. No, all kidding aside, that's a very, very valid point. And I think, again, collectively, we could do that.
Yeah.
A choice?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to add to the comment about walking in the shoes of those who don't have and feeling that. And I think that even within our own communities of color, we need to be more cognizant of the needs of our own people. And it reflected when you said that. Sunday, I went to church, as I do every Sunday, but I always take my cell phone. The service is live streamed, so many of our members do it that way. But I arrived at church, and then suddenly I remembered I didn't bring my cell phone. I almost had a panic attack because suddenly I didn't have my cell phone, even though I was right there. And I didn't need to stream the service. But just the feeling of not having that connection made me realize that there are so many thousands and thousands who never have that connection. So I think it's important for us to reflect on that very seriously about what it means to have access and equity and what that means. What does the word equity? Access does not mean equity. We can have access, but it still cannot be available to us, or it cannot be equitable in terms of the kinds of content and the way that that information comes to us.
Thank you. Behind you. You'll be second. Thank you. Thanks, Bonnie. Thank you. Thanks, Bonnie. You'll be next.
I just wanted to piggyback off of what the ladies just said when it comes down to understanding our own communities. Because I hear the conversation going about providing laptops and providing access and these devices, but I know that a lot of these communities, a lot of people in the community may still have cable. You know, people have cable, and if you have cable, most people have a bundle package, right? Where they have cable, the internet, the phone. And and I know this from looking into it I have an elderly father who's 83 years old, and he's trying to save money because he's on a fixed income. And when you go to try to break apart that bundle and just try to, got these streaming services that are for free, and you can just break that off and just use the internet. When you go to try to break that bundle off, that internet and that phone go up. And now it costs just as much as it cost when you had the cable and the bundle set, right? So what I'm saying is that before you try to put the device in the house, you have to be able to have sustainability for those devices. And a lot of these families are still being raised by elderly parents or parents who can't afford to provide that internet. So before you go to the internet to look for something, you have to have it and be able to sustain that. And when you're looking at whether you can afford to have an electricity bill or an internet bill, you're not gonna choose the internet. So
Go ahead, Bonnie. Bonnie, do you want to have one more comment before we?
I'm going to take a different tack. I go to conferences and they say, you know what? We have too many screens. The kids are looking at too many screens. She said, when I walk by the ocean, I should put my cell phone down. And the kids are saying, too many screens? The kids we work with, and we work in HUD classes, we love working with the kids because they appreciate it, but they don't have screens. They want to come to James Creek and stay because we have computers for them. And they will come for after school to stay and have the classes. But if you read the New York Times, it says, there are too many screens and all of these kids are being affected. When do we get included? If you talk about the colleges, how about computer science? I started off 10 years ago learning about computer science. Now I can't go to the conferences because you have to be a computer teacher. Well, if you're Bethune-Cookman or Howard or high schools, are there black computer science teachers? Hello? Not usually.
So thank you. I hear you, all four comments. I hear those comments. It's interesting because earlier today, when we were talking about CRA, and Robert's been talking to me about this for a while, but I've sort of have a lot going on and sort of hear it and haven't paid total attention really until today. I've read a lot, but I haven't really focused in. And earlier today, I'm like, damn, I better go figure out who's the CEO of First Republic Bank and go find them. And I totally realized that is a position of privilege that that was my first thought, and that I just could go find this person and go talk to them. So I think it's super interesting to consider that and sign up to be an ally perhaps. I don't know what exactly we can do about this. Second thing I would say is that the power of this program is communities, and the communities that have the people that have been committed to their families and their community members for years and years and years, that's where the power of this lies. And so I think that we hang on to that as well and get local banks who do care locally. And let's also be honest, they also have a requirement to do something with this money, right? So we are there to help them do a good thing with this money for the future of their own pocketbooks and the future of our communities and the future of our country. There's just a lot around all of this to sort of unpack and keep track of, and definitely appreciate all the comments.
I wanted to respond to your question. I don't know the lay of the land in your hometown, but I'll tell you what it's like in Fort Wayne, Indiana. The companies that do well, the companies that thrive, are those that embrace diversity, who have people that look like us and understand that they want a diverse customer base as well. I mean, I shop where I'm welcomed, and what bankers and every other business understands is that it's a global marketplace. And if I can't find it in Fort Wayne, Indiana, I can find it online or on the phone. And so they understand that. It's a very competitive marketplace, and for them to be picking and choosing who they want to do business is a company that will not stay in business very long. So.
And Robbie, you make a very good point, and all kidding aside, I think that would be the value of the webinar, if we do have the webinar or the on-campus summit, is to talk about how do you go in with confidence and negotiate. So good point, good point.
Okay. And that's why I use the two words, denied and denial. They both have a different meaning, not the meaning that we're used to, but I'll speak for myself. To just walk into a Fortune 500 company, I would want someone to go with me, definitely. And again, you're talking about a local community and bridging. So everyone, we know the challenges, but there are solutions. We all can be mentors when it's time to go in, and that's what we need.
Let me just add something to, maybe it's just a layer on top of this conversation. We've been doing a lot of work on the whole skills gap issue. I know a lot of folks are engaged in that conversation. I mean, the reality is in this country right now, there are over 7 million unfilled jobs, and that number is growing exponentially, actually. So to build a little bit on what Steve was just saying, CRA is a critically important program, and we've already acknowledged there are other uses for these dollars, so we have to make a case for why our use is important. But I think the point that he was making, I think we can expand just a little bit and say, a lot of these employers and a lot of these communities we're talking about are struggling with filling jobs and having folks who are qualified for them. So part of this, it seems to me, is helping them understand the reality on the ground, which is that one of the reasons these jobs are not being filled is because people don't have access to the tools and the resources they need to be able to apply for them. And I think once that can be established, you have a conversation. And it's also important, I think, to say that this is part of a more comprehensive effort that we all have to make together. We can't each go in to the bank and ask for a piece of this. But I think if there's a plan to address issues that actually strike the business community directly, we're finding there's a real openness on the part of the business community to genuinely engage with education. And I think this is one of the means of doing that. I just wanted to throw that out. Are there other questions for the group? I think we're getting close to the end, Robert.
Yes,
would you join me in thanking our panel? They did a great job. You want to make some housekeeping announcements?
Yes, a couple of quick housekeeping comments. Let me steal an agenda here. So we're going to have some dinner, and then we will reconvene tomorrow for a half day of work and frivolity, so we are going to reconvene. Get my schedule out here. Long-range planning tomorrow. Oh yeah, tomorrow. Okay, so breakfast will start at 7:45 if you'd like. You can be here as late as 8:15 and not miss any of the festivities. So breakfast will be available starting at 7:45. At 8:15 we will have a brief framing for the day, just 5 minutes. And then Jeannie Milliken-Bonds, whom you heard from this afternoon with the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond. You recall I mentioned that she is really as well informed as anybody is about the complex challenge of around CRA funding, particularly for broadband infrastructure in rural and inner city areas. And there's not much that's known that Jeannie does not know about that. And so she'll be remarking about that. Then we move right from that into our work groups and into really envisioning solutions. One of the things I really want to encourage you again is to really dig deep and think very feisty thoughts about what we can do together. We have grant makers for education. We have banking leaders here. We have regulators here in the room. We have a lot of skilled people in education, in technology, in affordable housing. We have a lot of expertise in this room to undertake systemic approaches to these complex problems that can only begin to be solved with working together. And we have all the ingredients and the willpower here and the smarts to pull that off. So I know you'll be having lots of thoughts tonight. So I encourage you to have a fun dinner and networking time, and we'll see you back here somewhere between 7:45 and 8:15. Thank you so much.